Now that we know how to group by one column, we can actually group by multiple columns. So when we're going and doing our grouping, we want to find all, like in the first table, first select here, we want to find all people in the employee table that have the same last name and work in the same department. Now, this is something, of course, that is hard to find, but if I have some people that work in the same department with the same last name, I want to know that, so that when I say Mr. Mr. Mickey, I know that there isn't just one Mickey, there's two Mickeys, for example. So here what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to group by two columns, the last name and the department ID. And so because I'm grouping by two columns, my select is going to also have two columns. So remember, anytime we select, it has to match the group by for the expression to be valid. So here I'm going to group all my data by last name and department ID. And then what I want to see is the count. I want to see how many items or how many rows exist in each group. Okay, and if I run that on our database, we will probably just end up with ones, unless we have some departments that have, two people with the same last name. Let's look at this select statement. Here, I want to group. I'm looking at the customer order, so I'm looking at all the orders that people have placed, and I want to group them by the customer ID and the product ID. So here, because I'm grouping by the customer ID and the product ID, it's going to tell me this customer ordered this product how many times, because that is what I'm counting. So I would get, every customer and the product, how many times they ordered that product. Let's look at this one. Here, if I want to check the last one just to see if I got it right or wrong, I can say, okay, show me customer ID and product ID from customer order, and let's just spot check one. So here, if I say, give me customer ID 5 and product ID 4, let's see how many rows I am going to get. And if you run this query, you would get that there are 3 rows, and this matches the 3 that the count gave me. So we can group by multiple columns. Just remember that you always have to match the group by whatever you're grouping by what you're selecting by. Let's try to do an example on our own. So let's look at the employee table. Okay, so the employee table, let's see if we have any duplicates. Let's sort by something. So let's order by first name. Okay, so here when I order by first name, I will find 2 Andrews, but they don't belong to the same department. I found 2 Anns that belong to the same department. So let's see if we do a group by the first name and department, if we get an Ann with 2. So let's see, we want to select, I want to see the first name, and I want to see the department ID, and I want to see a count. I want to know how many people. So I'm going to select that from my employee table, and I'm going to group by, again, the first name and the department ID, because we said whatever you're grouping by, you have to have selected it. And let's do an order by first name. So we see Ann first. Okay, so here I see that Ann in department 7, there are 2 people, and there are 2 Barbaras in group 6 also. So this is how you can use the group by with multiple columns. Now, when you want to limit what you're grouping by or what you're seeing, instead of using the where clause, you can use the having clause. So the having clause is kind of like the where, but it only applies with the group by. So let's look at an example. What I want to do here is I want to see the last name. Okay, I want to group by last name. I want to see every last name, how many times it appears. And so if I do that, it'll show me everyone, like how many they appeared. But what if I want to just see the ones that are duplicate, like they're more than one? I want to see the count that's more than one. So let's kind of like just run this query to see what it gives us. So here we'll say select last name and the count, employee, and we're grouping by last name. So it's going to tell us each last name, how many times it appeared. Okay. So some of them appeared only one time, and this is not what I'm really looking for. I want to say, I want to basically say where count is greater than 1. Because this is a group by, the count greater than 1 is not going to work. So what do I do instead? I use the halving. So count is not going to work. I'm going to use the halving. So the halving is kind of like the where that we used to do, but it only works with the group by. So here I'm going to say, and here I have to put this on. I have to match what I'm doing here. So again, where is not going to work, but I can say halving. So I want you to group by last name, and then I want you to only show me the ones that have a count greater than 1. Oops. And so now all the ones that had a 1 are not shown. I only see the 2s, 3s, and 4. And you can use the order by still. So I can say order by count. Okay, and so now it's ordering it by 2s, and then I see the 3s, and then I see the 4 at the end. So when you want to limit what you're seeing, you can use the halving if you're using the group by. Other functions not aggregate. Aggregate are for statistics like average, sum, count. Other functions that we can use are like min and max. If you want to know like the lowest price in a column or the lowest salary someone has, you can give the column name and say min or max. So here, if I want to know what's the minimum salary and the maximum salary in my employee table, I can use the select max salary, min salary from employee. You can also use it with the group by. So here I want to see the department ID, and for every department ID, I want to see the maximum salary for that department. Now, because I'm selecting on department ID, I'm going to group by department ID. So I'm going to put all my employees in groups by department ID, and then I'm going to go to every group and say, find me the max salary. And so it's going to show me for every department what the maximum salary is. And we can do that with money, with numbers, with dates. And all that will work. So here I want to see when was the first person hired, when was the last person hired. So the last person would be the max date, the most recent date, and the first person hired would be the minimum date. And then, we can also do other things like we can say in or equal. So if I, here it's showing me the max hire date and the min hire date, but I don't know who the person is. So I can do a complicated query where I say, okay, first of all, I want you to tell me the hire date, the biggest hire date from the employee table. Now that I know their hire date, I can say, okay, now show me their hire date, their name, whatever I want to see, where hire date is in this list. Now remember the select, even if it's selecting, if it's giving me one thing, it's also returning to me a list. So I can use the word in. I could also use the word, I could also use equal if I know that it's going to be one item. So because the select gives me a list back, I could use the in, or here, because I know I'm guaranteed to only get one maximum, I can also use the equal. So you can do that to grab more information. And we can do min and max with strings also, because strings, you can compare strings. So I can say, what's the maximum last name? What's the minimum last name? And here they'll tell you like Adams is the smallest, Woods is the biggest. So for this classwork, you're going to do the same as the last classwork. You're going to make sure that you have your sample SQL data file loaded. And then you're going to write queries that match what I'm asking you to do in the Word document that's loaded on Blackboard. And then you're going to submit screenshots of running your code.